So thank you for joining us. Today is May 30th, 2017, and this is Title III, Part A, but specifically as pertains to our immigrant students portion of the program evaluation series. Really quick, before I start moving into the agenda, I just want to remind you with Title III, Part A, it's comprised of several subparts, but in general, the bulk of it really falls under the English Language Acquisition, Language Enhancement, and then Academic Achievement Act. So if you've joined us for our previous webinar, specifically Title III Part A with that English Language Acquisition Act, you've seen the majority of what we're going to cover today. There are some pieces that have been added that are specific to Subpart 4, which specifically talks about our emergency immigrant education program. But on a whole, the majority of this information comes from our previous webinar that we've had time to share together previously, which was Title III Part A, English Language Acquisition Act. So just as a reminder before we get into this as well, because sometimes this comes up, as we know, you cannot ask directly about a student's immigration status. And we will get into the definition of immigrant, but I just wanted to remind you that under the agency, under the TEA, or approved by the TEA, there are 3 definitions that we recognize. And each definition has a very unique purpose. It kind of just depends on what that definition is being used for. So for example, under No Child Left Behind, or NCLB, the definition that the agency recognizes and uses serves to identify basically our recent immigrants for the Title III program. But when you're thinking about PEAMS kind of information, the Student Assessment Division, their definition basically assists in determining the appropriate evaluation of our limited English proficiency students in Texas. And then when you're thinking about ESOL 1 and 2, the definition there is determined or helps to determine eligibility for our LEP students who may receive high school credit for the 2 courses, so ESOL 1 and 2. So going into it with that understanding, I am going to focus primarily on how NCLB defines immigrant or students who are immigrants, because that's what ties back into the program evaluation of this federal funding. So here is our agenda. We're going to cover the program evaluation series overview, the statutory requirements, use of funding, whether or not some scenarios are allowable or unallowable, program evaluation process itself, as well as a few other things in the program evaluation process. It's going to be the general steps that you see in our program evaluation booklet that's also posted on our region10.org /Title I website. But there are a couple of things specific to program evaluation for Title III Part A, and I do have that information in that segment as well. Then we'll transition into the CNA and CIP link, look at other program evaluation series sessions, and then we'll close out with a few resources. So the program evaluation series, if you have participated in previous ones, you have seen this part of it. So basically we're going to cover what this is, how many we're offering, and why we are in fact offering it. So what you see on the screen now is our series description. And this is the information that comes or that is directly seen on our flyer, which was disseminated across our listserv and also posted on our website. But in short, if you're receiving federal funding or accepting federal funding, we are tasked and required to provide program evaluation annually. So the flyer itself is, again, as I mentioned, has been disseminated across our listserv, but also on our website. Looks as follows. That's what you see here on the right-hand side of the screen. There are 9 in this series, and we have already, this will be session number 6. So the previous ones started off on May 17th with Title I Part A and have gone all the way up until today, which is specific to our Title III Part A with a little bit more detail and attention specifically to our immigrant students. Tomorrow and June 1st, so Thursday, will be the last 2 in our series that we're offering under this No Child Left Behind program evaluation series. And we're offering these because we want to make sure that if there's any questions in regards to how I can effectively evaluate my programs, to be able to make appropriate recommendations as far as continuation of program strategies for the upcoming year, we want to make sure that we're providing this information to you so that at any time that you want to go back and have a look or share with colleagues, it is here in one central location. So the statutory requirements, all of this stuff that we're getting ready to look into as far as the stat requirements, it's going to be found in our NCLB consolidated application. It's the question that comes up with this a lot is like pretty much what is the purpose of the evaluation and why are we engaging in this? So the evaluation process looks at the onset, what it is that we said we were going to set out to do, what we actually accomplished, and to what degree we accomplished it. So the evaluation components have to be planned from the very beginning. Even though this is something that we do at the conclusion of the program or conclusion of the implementation, i.e. end of the school year, this still is something that we have to plan and to really actively and proactively set out to say, this is what we're looking at the very beginning. So this does include like collecting our baseline data. So at this point, beginning of the year, of the school year, what is it that we have? How are we currently functioning? So that as we do checks throughout our summative and then finally our formative and then finally our summative evaluation pieces of the program, we have concrete data to be able to look at and say, this is where we started, this is where we are now, was this worth it? And when I'm saying concrete data, yes, that sounds quantitative in nature, but it can also include your qualitative data as well, especially depending on the population that you're specifically serving underneath that federal program. So data typically, and as a baseline, should be collected from your fund sources, so your budget reports. It should also be collected from our CNAs, and then our IPs, our improvement plans, be it at the district or campus level, we should be looking at that improvement plan. And we'll tie into that towards the end of our time together when we look at the link between the CNA and the CIP and then the program evaluation itself. And at the onset, if you're looking at this and you say to yourself, I don't have as much data as I would prefer to be able to make as objective of an evaluation determination as possible, that's fine. I mean, we know this now. So going forward into next year, what is it that I can do to start off having a more robust data sources to look at? And just again, as a reminder, I know I said this to you earlier, but if you want to look at the breakdown of the statutory requirements, they are indicated in the provisions and assurances section of our No Child Left Behind consolidated application. The NCLB stat requirements that you see here on the screen, these are the general ones that were provided and, well, required if you look at the program evaluation. The applicant will adopt and use proper methods of administering each such program, including the enforcement of any obligations imposed by law on agencies, institutions, organizations, and other recipients responsible for carrying out each program, and the correction of deficiencies in program operations that are identified through audits, monitoring, or evaluation. So in short, we are required to use proper methods of evaluating our programs. And then at the end, seeing if there's any pieces that we need to correct or deficiencies in the actions and program that we are implementing for the benefit of our students. So specifically under Title III, Part A, we're looking at the stat requirements. It says that the LEA will annually assess the English proficiency of all LEP children participating in programs funded with these federal funds. Digging a little deeper, it says that Title III, Part A of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, as reauthorized under the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001, aims to ensure that English language learners and immigrant students attain English language proficiency and meet the state's challenging academic achievement standards. As I said at the onset, some of this information is identical to what we covered during Title III Part A, specifically the initial act that I've already referenced, because this is all under the same part. There are some additional requirements under subpart 4, which we'll get into as pertains to our immigrant students, but some of this information that you see in this session is going to be identical to what we saw in our last session. So getting verbatim into the law, I wanted to start off with the actual definition that we adhere to. As I mentioned, in Texas, there are 3 definitions for our immigrant children and youth, really kind of just contingent upon which data you're trying to collect, where you're trying to implement, or not even implement, and I don't want to say acknowledge, where you're trying to indicate them, I guess would be another way of saying it, in the system. But I do want to show you the definition that we adhere to as a state specific to our No Child Left Behind designation. So here is the definition of immigrant children and youth. The term immigrant children and youth, which is defined in Title III, refers to individuals who fall under the following 3 components. Part A, they are aged between 3 and 21. Part B, they were not born in any state. And Part C, they have not been attending 1 or more schools in any 1 or more states for more than 3 full academic years. So one of the things I want to point out about that, because then the question comes to, there are other questions that come to bear just looking at this definition piece. I want to clarify a couple of things as far as what states define as full academic years, because that part is a little tricky. Some states define an academic year as, say, 9 months, while other states count an academic year as 10 months. So that's when it becomes a little more interesting when you're looking from state to state. So if a student has been in different schools, in different school districts, or even in different states, the number of months that the student has been in school in any 1 or more of the states has to add up to, or rather cannot total up to, more than 3 full academic years, because that is sometimes a question, and a reasonable question that comes up. If we have a student that, yes, may have been in the area, but have not been, let's say, fully immersed in the educational system, how does that work? If one state says it's 9 and another state says it's 10, cumulative months is what we look at, and it cannot total more than 3 full academic years. That's where they kind of make the distinction, or that's where they make that cutoff of what's considered that 3 full academic. Now, this program purpose is the general one that's found under the English Language Acquisition, Language Enhancement, and Academic Achievement Act. So that's your Title III, basically Part A of this. But this program purpose still adheres, or still applies to our students who are immigrants. So the purpose of this part is to help ensure that children who are limited English proficient, and that includes our immigrant children and youth, attain English proficiency, develop high levels of academic achievement, or high levels of academic attainment in English, and meet the same challenging state academic content and student achievement standards as all of their peers. The second purpose of this is to make sure that our students achieve at high levels in the core academic subjects. So core academic subjects, of course, it falls under No Child Left Behind, and as we transition into ESSA, it's referred to, or the term becomes well-rounded education. But either way it goes, Part 1 is focusing on the language acquisition piece. Are they having high levels of academic attainment in English? Portion 2 of the purpose is focusing on the actual content itself, their academic performance. Part 3 delves a little deeper and says, hey, are we developing high quality language instruction so that we're able to actually teach our students who have limited English proficiency? Part 4 delves a little deeper as well and says, hey, let's look at the quality of the instructional programs that we are providing to our students to help prepare them. Part 5 delves even more deeper to say, let's build the capacity, and building capacity of, in this particular case, of the schools themselves. So that can include the teachers, and it can include, of course, the children And then part 6 is primarily for or specifically addressing our families and community members that support our students who have limited English proficiency. Now, there are a couple of more sections, or a couple of more purposes in this section. 7 is to streamline the language instruction to make sure that all of our students, basically regardless of where they are or what state they're in, are able to develop their proficiency in English and still meet those academic and student achievement standards that are required by their state. Part 8 is having a closer look yet again at keeping schools as well as the states accountable for making sure that there are increases in English proficiency of our students, and requiring that we see here there's demonstrated improvements in English proficiency each fiscal year, and that adequate yearly progress is made for our students who are immigrants as well. And then number 9 here, this is the last program purpose under this section, says to provide state educational agencies and our LEAs with the flexibility to actually implement language instruction educational programs, and that it is based on scientifically based research on teaching limited English proficient students. And that's one of the key pieces from this. It's very easy to find research that says, oh, this is scientifically based. That's lovely, but we need to look and delve deeper and say, okay, with this specific population, what are strategies and tools that work specifically for this population that has noted results and noted benefits and noted success for this specific population? This program purpose comes directly from subpart 4, which is the Emergency Immigrant Education Program. So in addition to the other pieces that we've covered, because those apply to our students who are immigrants as well, in addition, the purpose of this particular subpart, which is subpart 4, is to assist eligible LEAs that experience unexpectedly large increases in student population due to immigration. 1, to provide high quality instruction to immigrant children and youth, and 2, to help such children and youth with their transition into American society and meet the same challenging state academic content and student achievement standards as all other children in that state. So this is just in addition, and this is especially with recent occurrences in our country. This subpart 4 really kicks in because this is making sure that in addition to everything else, in addition to other pieces that we're covering under Title III Part A, just that reminder under subpart 4, what are we doing in addition to, or to meet the additional needs and the very specific needs of not only our limited English proficient students, but our children who are immigrants. This I don't want to read, I'm not going to read all of this to you, and as you can see here on the screen, as pertains to the state application, I started off with number 7 because 1 through 6 covers the same information that we've already seen. But I really wanted to point out number 7, section A, because this again delves specifically with our students who are immigrants. So when we're referencing money, no state educational agency shall receive any payment at all in the fiscal year for our grant funding, basically, unless we can, and there's sections 1 through 6, but number 7, provide assurances that to the extent consistent with the number of immigrant children and youth enrolled in the non-public elementary schools or secondary schools within the district served by an LEA, after consultation with appropriate officials, shall provide for the benefit of such children and youth secular, neutral, and non-ideological services, materials, and equipment necessary for the education of such children and youth. So that kind of delves more into our P&P side of the world, of which if you have specific questions on private nonprofit, Laura Griffin is the consultant here who works directly with that population and being able to assist you with that. So if you have questions specifically about private nonprofit or P&P, our contact information will be up at the very end of this, and I will show you Laura Griffin's contact info so you can reach out to her directly. But this is just a reminder that even with our students who are immigrant children and youth, if they are enrolled within this area, we still, or within the district served by the LEA, we still have to be able to provide supplemental services for them, and that are are providing materials and equipment so that they can be educated and so that they can receive the support and services that they are entitled to. So this comes again from just general Title III Part A, but there is a requirement for local plans, and each plan that the state education agency submits basically is saying that the plans have to be based on the following. So we do have to turn in a plan, which we know, and it has to include these pieces. Content area 1, we have to describe the program and activity that we are proposing that we're going to develop, implement, and administer under the grant. It's pretty simple. It's saying, hey, you're giving me this money in order to be able to meet this population's needs. This is what I anticipate, and this is what I plan to do to meet this population's needs. Number 2 says describe how the eligible entity will use this funding to meet the annual measurable achievement objectives. Now, with AMAOs, one thing I do want to point out, I do not have information on the accountability side of this. If you have questions specific to accountability portions, I would highly recommend that you contact our bilingual migrant and ESL department, our team here, because they're the ones that stay up to date with all of that information, because that is specific to accountability. What we're going to be covering in our time together is specific to evaluation of the program itself and what the program is. Number 3 in the local plan says describe how we are going to hold elementary and secondary schools receiving funding accountable for meeting those AMAOs, making adequate yearly progress, and then annually measuring the English proficiency of our students. So these are the content pieces that we have to, and there are a couple more on the next slide, but these are the first 3 content pieces that as a local LEA, I have to make sure I'm addressing. And here are sections 4, 5, and 6 under the plan that is required that we complete and develop. We also have to say how we are going to promote parent and community participation in programs for our limited English proficient children. There is, in all of our programs, there is, of course, an emphasis in making sure that we are very conscientious of and attuned to meeting the needs and building the capacity of our parents, families, and community members. One of the things that I will say specifically under Title III, there is even more of an emphasis on making sure that we are meeting the needs of parents, families, and community members under this program. And part of the reason why is because in addition to the regular challenges that families face, that students face with being in the education system, there are additional challenges, there are additional could be or would be barriers for this population. And this federal funding source just wants to make sure that we are addressing it, we're acknowledging it, and we're doing everything within our possible to prevent probable or possible barriers actually becoming barriers. So just as a side note, I know we already know that. Number 5, under the local plan, we have to make sure that we are containing assurances that we are consulting with the teachers, researchers, administrators, and parents, and any other community groups and nonprofit organizations as appropriate, and developing the plan. And then number 6, we have to describe how language instruction educational programs carried out under this will help to ensure that our kiddos being served by this program are developing English proficiency. So at the local level, we are required to actually develop these plan, and it has to contain these 6 pieces. These are the contents of it. So as you can imagine, when we get to program evaluation piece, as I mentioned before, there are a couple of components that are specific to Title III Part A, which I mentioned in the last one, but I will also mention again because there are other pieces that are specific to our students who are immigrant youth that are, once we get into that program eval piece, basically all come back to, did you address these 6 pieces in your local plan? Here are a couple of other things I wanted to make sure that I pointed out to you. Teacher English fluency. This part is kind of interesting because, in short, basically the plan or within our law, within the guidance, I don't have to be fluent in the language of the students that are in my class, which we know. I just have to be fluent in English. I have to be fluent in written and oral communication skills in English. So with the teacher English fluency portion, section 3116, is basically saying, regardless of the other languages that the instructor may or speak, the one that matters in this program is whether or not they are fluent in written and oral communication in English. Other requirements under the local plan, these follow here. These are just additional 5 pieces. You have to contain assurances, which is basically, it's just saying, I am saying that, and I attest to the fact that I am doing these things. I am eligible, and I'm making sure I'm complying with what's required as an LEA. I am also assuring that annually I will be looking at the English proficiency of all of my students. I'm also assuring that I will make sure that my plan is based on scientifically based research, and not just research in general, research that has noted and proven results with this specific population, so our limited English proficiency children. I am also assuring that my kiddos that are in this program are going to be speaking, reading, and writing and comprehending English, and that this is going to meet the state standards. And lastly, I am also assuring that I am not as in an LEA, am not in violation of any of the laws. I wanted to include this portion, and this comes directly from subpart 4, which is specific to our immigrant youth as well, in regards to state allotments, but particularly just part number 1. With everything going on, with the fluctuating numbers that we have due to recent global crisis, I thought this was appropriate to include because we do get that question about funding. So here's the first portion I wanted to show you here. In general, determinations by the Secretary under this section for any period with respect to the number of immigrant children and youth shall be made on the basis of data or estimates provided to the Secretary by the state educational agency. It's based on criteria that they've already preset. So what comes up, and the question that comes with this is, if we now have a sudden influx of our kiddos who are in our that we're being served in our district, or what do we do, or in our charter, what do we do when we now have more students than we have funding? And that comes up, and even how do they determine the funding that we receive? Well, the state actually examines the data that we turn into them, and what they do is they average the 2 preceding fiscal years, basically. And then in that percentage or number of immigrant children and youth, they then decide how much, based on a formula, how much funding we're going to receive. So the challenge then becomes, well, if this is happening during the school year, will I get additional funding? More than likely, the answer is going to be no, because based on definition, the funding is determined by the 2 preceding fiscal years. So that does make it a little bit more challenging, because I'm doing more with the same amount of money than I had before. So it's almost like I'm doing more with less, because I have more students now who, by all rights, are entitled to be served under this program, but they cannot be because, well, they are being served, but are they being served to the extent that my students under this program were the year before? Maybe, maybe not. This is where it becomes a little trickier. So another thing I wanted to bring up as well is we get questions a lot in regards to, can an LEA receive a subgrant based on like the number of LEP students, and also receive funds under the set aside with a significant increase in immigrant students? And the answer to that is yes. You can receive funding under both types of grants. Okay. Another question that we get asked quite a bit, I wrote this down to make sure that I shared this or talked about it with you guys today. Should states ensure that only immigrant funds are used for immigrant students? Well, the federal formula does not designate they don't separate it. So with the federal formula, they use both our LEP data and our immigrant data in order to calculate like state allocations. But as a state, we don't have to account for these funds separately. So when it comes down to awarding funding, the state's just basically all awarded under Title III, whether or not we've actually met the definition of immigrant children and youth. So it's all one pot as far as the state is concerned when they provide that money to us, but we can apply for additional grants. That was pretty much the bulk of the law piece. So before I go into use of funding, do you have any questions? Because it's quite a bit of information. It is, again, as I mentioned before, if you participated in our other Title III Part A program evaluation series, this information, the vast majority of it is the same because it's all Title III, but we are providing a few other additional pieces specific to our immigrant children and youth. But do you have any questions about the legal part of it or the statute part of it before we start going into funding? Okay, seeing none, let's keep going. So I want to show you with usage of funds, specifically Section 3247, which again is under Subpart 4, specifically for our immigrant students as well. I want to show you what they refer to as enhanced instructional opportunities in the law. So what does that actually mean? Funds awarded under this can be used to pay for what the law determines to be enhanced instructional opportunities for immigrant children and youth. And it can include, this is not an exhaustive or cumulative list. These are just as provided in the law. So just, FYI, I know I can do these because this is what's actually in the statute. So I can use funding for enhanced instructional opportunities specifically for this population, which can include 1, family literacy, parent outreach, and training activities designed to assist parents to become more active participants in the education process. 2, I can use this funds for support of personnel, including teacher aides who have been specifically trained or are being trained to provide services to immigrant children and youth. 3, this funding can be used for tutorials, mentoring, and academic or career counseling for immigrant children and youth. 4, identification and acquisition of curricular materials, educational software, and technologies. 5, the provision of basic instruction services that are directly attributable to the presence in the school district of immigrant children and youth, and that can include payment of costs of providing additional classroom supplies, can also include transportation or other costs that are directly attributable to such additional basic instruction services. And then number 6, such other activities related to the purpose of this subpart. So these are the, end of the day, I know if I can say or tie it to this, I can use this funding for these things. So a couple of other things I want to point out to you as well. Specifically in regards to what they deem other instructional or other instruction services, one of the things that you can include and may want to consider as well, when we're talking our elementary and secondary schools in the U.S., programs of introduction to the educational system and civics education could fall under this. When we're referencing coordinating, let's say, with community-based organizations or institutions of higher learning, or other entities that have expertise in working specifically with this population to assist parents of immigrant children and youth, we can also offer comprehensive community services. Now, those terms can be a little broad, and that's when you want to go back and do that RNA test. Refer to EDGAR as far as is it reasonable, necessary, allocable, and allowable, but you also just know going into this that you can have a little bit more freedom with coordinating and coordination of an integration of funds, but also coordinating with community organizations if you can show and if you can prove that by doing so, we are supporting and enhancing the instructional opportunities for our immigrant children and youth. So what I want to go into now is a little bit more information about program funding requirements, specifically what is considered an allowable or unallowable expenditure. So I have 4 examples for this. One is specific to immigrants, and then the other 3 are more Title III Part A in general. Is this an allowable or unallowable cost? So here is the first one I have for you. Can Title III funds be used for extra duty pay for staff to assist with assessments to determine LEP students' language proficiency? And this is a common question we receive. Can I use Title III funds for extra duty pay if I am specifically asking the staff to assist with the assessments to actually determine language proficiency? What do you think? Thank you so much for participating. Okay, this is not allowable. I do have a couple of, I broke it down by initial assessment and then annual assessment, but under the initial assessment of the proficiency, Title III funds should not be used for that initial assessment to help identify the student as a LEP student, as the initial ELP assessment is required. So as a reminder, if it's required, I cannot use Title III because now we run into the supplementing versus supplanting challenge. So because this was already required under state policy, I can't use funding for Title III to say, okay, we're going to have some of our staff do the initial assessment, because the initial assessment is something that we have to do anyway. So annual assessment of proficiency, that's never allowable either. Part of the reason why is that, again, it's required under state policy to make sure that we are administering TELPAS. A little caveat here with PMP schools, while PMP schools are not required to administer the TELPAS, an annual assessment of English language proficiency is required under Title I Part A. And because of that, Title III then must be supplemental to Title I Part A. So in short, the answer still is, no. From the initial assessment and the annual assessment, I cannot use the funding for that. Really, the only time it can somewhat be allowable to use Title III funds to pay for costs associated with the initial assessment to determine if a student is LEP is if the student, or when the student is attending a private nonprofit and the assessment is what was chosen. And again, with PNP, we're chosen through consultation between LEA and the PNP school official as a way to identify PNP students who are eligible for those Title III services. But again, if you are wanting specific feedback and more guidance as pertains to our PNP, Laura Griffin is the one to speak with about that. But that's that example. It's a very brief example. That is one of the few times you can kind of start to dwell in the land of this is possibly allowable. Here's our next question. Can an LEA use Title III funds for a language translator or interpreter? This one is a little tricky. So this is one of the answers no one likes to hear, because it kind of just depends on what the exact duties are. And what I mean by that is whether it's allowable would depend on the exact responsibilities of the translator or interpreter. Since Title III funds can only be used to supplement the level of federal, state, and local public funds that in the absence of it would have been expended anyway. If, however, the translation or interpreting is for a purpose above and beyond, and that's the key to remember with Title III funding, is this above and beyond the level of what we were required to do anyway? So above and beyond the level of other federal, state, and local requirements, then it may be an allowable use of the funding. But again, just in a nutshell, looking at that question, and I intentionally kind of kept it a little vague, it really just depends, because again, it has to be, is this going above and beyond what was already required and mandated that I do as an LEA, either by the state or by the federal government. So for example, translation of instructional materials or instruction in a language other than English, that's not allowable. I can't use my Title III funding for that because it already falls under what I am required to do. So under the Office of Civil Rights, I have to translate into other languages as required or as needed by my students that I'm serving. So I cannot say, that I'm going to use my Title III funding or pay for Title III funding to overcome language barriers and to ensure that our EL, which now under ESSA is going to be EL or English learners, but under NCLB was our ELLs. I can't say I'm using that funding to ensure that they have equal access to education and educational excellence, because I already had to do that. So again, it goes back to the concept of, is this above and beyond what I was already doing and what I was required to do? This also applies to the translation of just general information. So, and what I mean by that is, if there's the information that's on your website, if you are doing a newsletter or other communication pieces, translating that into another language doesn't mean I can use my Title III funding. I was required to do that. One more just example, thinking, let's see here. Let's think back to our parent involvement pieces. So to say I'm going to provide, let's say, interpretation during a Title III parent involvement meeting or an event, or I'm providing translation of materials to be used for supplemental parent classes, that could possibly be an allowable use of funds, providing that all of the other what are known as supporting conditions were already met, because that is going above and beyond. But if I was already required to do so, like just translating the meeting notice into Spanish under Title I Part A, I had to do that anyway for my families. So that's not allowable. But if I'm going above and beyond that, then that's when you kind of start delving into, well, this is allowable and coverable financially under Title III. Two more examples. Allowable or unallowable. Can Title III funds be used to pay for teachers to get ESL certification? This one is tricky. I left it kind of vague on purpose. And no, I am not trying to get you guys tripped up. I promise I'm not. But this one's a little tricky because it's some parts of it is allowable and other parts aren't. So let me break down what I mean by that. In general, it would be allowable provided we are going above and beyond what is required under state policy. But here's the piece of this that's where it's kind of possible on this end, but then possible not on the other end. So I can't help assist our teachers in preparing for certification to teach our what was known as ELLs under NCLB. So I can help by supporting certification by providing, let's say, the prep materials for the certification tests. I can use Title III funds to pay teacher stipends to attend certification prep training. However, I cannot use Title III funding to pay for the test itself. That's when it gets interesting. So I can pay for the other stuff. I can pay for the prep. I can pay for the sub if it's that's going to be used in, or if that sub is being used, or I'm sorry, the stipends. I can give stipends if they're going to attend this cert prep training, but I can't pay for the test itself with Title III funding. That one's a little tricky. So I just want to make sure that I took the time to explain the difference. Anything preparation for it, that PD, so to speak, for it, is not a problem with using Title III funding for it, but the individual tests themselves, you cannot pay that out of Title III. Now, you can pay it out of other title funding if you choose to, use your coordination and integration, like your Title II, but I cannot pay for the test itself out of my Title III allocation. So last example, guys. Can an LEA use Title III LEP funds for a parent literacy program? And knowing how, again, Title III feels about parent and community engagement and involvement, can we use Title III funds for a parent literacy program? Thank you. We definitely can. We can use this funding for this. In accordance with Title III Part A, this is an allowable use of funds, provided that those base conditions are met. And I mentioned this to you before. What are the base conditions? Well, the base conditions fall to these four things. I have to make sure that the activity is reflected in the district's consolidated application. I have to make sure that the cost involved, and this is more Egger pieces, is necessary and reasonable to carry out the activity. I have to make sure that the district has determined that this program cannot be funded by another source, including Title I, because with parent engagement, community and engagement, Title I covers quite a bit of that. So that's why when we're saying, where it says I have to make sure it can't be funded by another source, it's because that one, Title I specifically, really does cover quite a bit when referencing parent and community engagement. And then the last piece here, this other condition, I have to make sure that the program serves only parents of LEP students. So when we're talking about our parent literacy programs, it's definitely allowable, knowing the way we feel as a education entity about our parent engagement, specifically with this population, this very specific population. We can do this. You just have to make sure that the conditions on the screen are already met. So I just want to sum this up with just in general, kind of a good rule of thumb here before we go into a couple of other things with local uses of funds. With Title III, to determine whether an expenditure would be allowable, you want to be able to answer and have documentation for the following, and this comes directly from the agency. How is the expenditure reasonable and necessary to carry out the intent and purpose of the program? Which, as we know, mirrors exactly what we just saw in the legislation and the statute with the USDE. We want to be able to answer and document the following. What need, as identified in our CNA, does the capital expenditure address? And then we have to explain how that capital expenditure addresses this need. As I've said on several other opportunities for speaking with you all, and especially with our CNA and CIP process, and I'll hit on this a little bit as we go forward into the link between the CNA, the CIP, and then the program evaluation, it all comes back to that comprehensive needs assessment. Anything that I want to do should be identified as a need in that CNA, which then makes its way as an action or strategy to address the need in the improvement plan. Number 3, I want to be able to answer and document the following. How will the expenditure be evaluated to measure a positive impact on student achievement? Because as with all federal funding, it goes back to student achievement. And then the 4th one, how is the expenditure supplemental to other federal and non-federal programs? With Title III, and well, with all of them going forward into SL, with the exception of Title I, that supplement, not supplant clause is still in there, and it's in here under Title III. So just as a reminder, basically what we're saying is if I'm using this Title III funding, I have to address it in my application itself. So at the conclusion of this year, because this is program evaluation time, this should have been addressed in the NCLB consolidated application as a need. And if you're looking forward, you want to make sure if you anticipate or are planning based on needs identified in your CNA to try to use Title III funding, this should be reflected in your ESSA consolidated application. You also want to make sure that there are benefits, and like just to wrap this up, what benefits are there for this specific student population? What benefits will be had by our students identified as immigrants? Again, cost, reasonable, necessary, and making sure that this is not supplanting. So in the absence of Title III funds, would I still be doing this activity? Is this, again, above and beyond how we as an LEA ensure equitable access and excellence in education for all of our students? And will only immigrant students benefit from this activity or service? So I just wanted to provide that just as a, kind of a reminder when we're looking in general at allowable uses of funding. These are questions you need to be able to fall back on and be able to answer, and then have documented documentation supporting the questions and answers as well. All right, guys, a few more things with funding, and then we will transition into the next piece. But I wanted to make sure that we were good as far as understanding what the legislation says in regards to uses of funds. So here's a couple of more things. This one is under Section 3115, which is the Title III Part A General, the actual act itself. So the purpose of this, and you've seen some of this already, but just as a reminder, because the statute is the statute, so some of it does repeat itself a little bit. In general, we have to make sure that money used under this grant program are here for the improvement of the education of limited English proficient children. And we're going to do that by assisting these children learn English, helping them meet the challenging state academic content and student achievement standards, and then carrying out activities and using approaches and methodologies, again, based on scientifically based research with this population, targeting our limited English proficient children and our immigrant children and youth for the following. 1, developing and implementing new language instruction. And this starts early childhood education throughout. 2, carrying out highly focused, innovative, and locally designed activities to help expand or enhance what we currently have in place with our language instruction. 3, we're also making sure that we're implementing within our school and our school-wide programs opportunities to upgrade all relevant programs, activities, and operations as relates to language instruction. And then 4, we're also making sure that we're implementing with everyone, with the LEA, with agency-wide programs, activities and operations related specifically to language instruction, so that academic content instruction for our children that fall under this grant program are met. We have here just a couple of required activities, just as an FYI. We are, again, required to increase the English proficiency of our limited English proficient children, and that means we're providing high-quality language instruction. So with this, we're making sure that we are increasing our English proficiency and the academic achievement and what NCLB deemed called core academic subjects, and which under ESSA are called well-rounded education. And we want to make sure that under this program, we're providing high-quality professional development to the classroom teachers, principals, administrators, and other school or community-based organization personnel. And this also, of course, includes families. With this high-quality PD has to design and improve the instruction and assessment of this population, enhance the ability of the educator to understand and use curricular assessment measures and instruction strategies for this population. Again, based on scientifically based research, demonstrating the effectiveness of the PD in increasing the children's English proficiency. And this kind of also takes me back to something else as well, just as a reminder, because Title II gets tricky sometimes when we're referencing PD. Any PD that you're using this Title III funding for, it's not supposed to be a one and done. This, whatever you're using that PD funding for, specifically with Title III, we have to be able to show that it's sustained over time. This impacts the quality and the type of education that these kiddos are receiving from their teachers, from their support staff, from their principals, administrators over time. It's not just like a motivational speaker that came in during back to school time and we're so excited about the year, which again, it can serve a purpose, of course, but just not using your Title III or your Title II funding for it. In addition, we want to make sure that with this high quality PD, that we are providing opportunities for it to be sufficient intensity and duration, and to have a positive and lasting impact on the performance, which is what I just referenced. That this is something that is long-term, it's comprehensive PD, and it's established so that the assessments and needs of everyone involved actually are met. They actually are increased as far as overall proficiency, not only English language, but the skill set of all of those involved with assessing and all of those involved with educating this population. So a couple of more things. These are, I read to you a few other specifically under immigrant activities that we know for sure you could do. This is general Title III. We know for sure we can do these activities because they're noted in the statute. Upgrade program objectives and effective instruction. Improve the instructional program for our limited English proficient children by identifying, acquiring, and upgrading their curricular. We can provide tutorials. We can provide intensified instruction. We can develop and implement the elementary and secondary school language instruction programs. And we can provide and improve the English proficiency and academic achievement of our kiddos that fall under this limited English proficient category. A couple of other things here as we round this out. These are just guaranteed activities that we know we can do that are directly mentioned in the statute. We can use funding for providing community participation programs such as family literacy services and parent outreach to help and improve the English language skills of the children themselves, and also to assist the parents in helping their children improve their academic achievement and become active or more active participants in the educational programs of their kiddos. And then the last two here, number 7, improve the instruction of limited English children by providing for the acquisition and development of technology, access to and participation in electronic networks for materials, and incorporation of their resources. And then the last one here, carrying out other activities that are consistent with the purposes of this section. Again, some of this should sound familiar because this also came out of subpart 4, which was specific for our immigrant students. And this section 3115 is specific or subgrantee activities that are pre-authorized that are for the whole of Title III Part A. And then lastly, we see here the supplement, not supplant, does apply as always because these are supplemental funding. This particular funding source, Title III Part A, is supplemental in nature. So that goes back to, again, going above and beyond what was already required by us by either federal legislation or state guidance. Okay. If you have specific questions as pertains to administrative expenses, I would again highly recommend that you contact our bilingual migrant ed and ESL department. They keep up to date with all of those changes or implementation things as pertains to Title III specifically. We're going through, as we all know, a bit of a transition as we go into ESSA. So there are a few things that, you know, we still have we have our latest guidance on, but as with all things, when you're going through a transition period, there may be some questions that come up that we don't have guidance on yet. And once we get those questions, we turn around and we ask others for further clarification. So if you have any questions that weren't addressed so far in this funding piece and everything we've covered up to this point, accountability pieces, please let us know and we will make sure we get you in the right direction. Okay, so going on to program evaluation, I am going to pause here for a second. I do want to remind you that in this program evaluation piece, we're going through the general process itself. We'll have a look at the program evaluation tool, and there are specific program evaluation pieces to Title III that I address in this section as well. So to this point, do you have any specific questions for me? All right, let's keep going. The program evaluation process is, there are these 5 steps. If you're looking at the program evaluation booklet itself, which can be found on TA's website as well as our own region10.org/Title I site, this is page 6. And what you'll see there is a little bit of a step stool graphic in the program booklet. And what I have here, just broke them down into kind of a continuation arrows. But these are the 5 steps. The first of which is listing the needs, identifying strategies, identifying funds, reviewing data, and then evaluating the impact of the program. So step 1, which goes into listing the needs, this comes directly from that CNA. As I mentioned earlier, and as you'll hear me say quite a bit in the remainder of the time we have together, it all starts and ends with that CNA. So when I'm looking at the needs that were identified through that comprehensive needs assessment, I want to go back to those 8 areas that are comprised of the CNA and say, hey, these were the needs identified. This is what we're going to do to meet those needs. And at the program evaluation piece of it, did we actually accomplish what we said we were going to accomplish? So this is just a screenshot of one of the 8 areas. This is student achievement. You see there at the top, it just gives you a little definition about what, how we define student achievement. Then we see potential data sources, and that includes promotion retention rates, state and AYP data tables. We see TELPAS, AMAO results on student work. And you also see there at the bottom, data sources reviewed. So just again, as a reminder, with the data sources, we want to make sure that we are using diverse and pulling data from a variety of resources. It's not just STAR data. It's not just benchmark data. That's part of the reason why they have those potential data sources listed there, just as a reminder that it should come from a variety of places. And specifically when we're referencing our Title III Part A population, and in this instance, our immigrant population, we want to use and include some of those qualitative data pieces as well, such as your, focus group discussions or surveys or one-on-one face-to-face interaction. As a reminder, this is the backside of what the CNA template looks like. You'll see there at the top, we have our strengths and then our needs or opportunity of growth. And then at the bottom there, you see the summary of needs. And as a reminder with this, we highly encourage you to list more than 1 or 2 needs that are prioritized. Part of the reason why, let's say that we all of a sudden received extra funding, or within your district, within your charter, funding was reallocated and now we have some extra money. Well, or let's say, we received a community partner who now has some funds that they are going to be willing to spend with our students. Technically, it has to come from the CNA. The need that we're using, that we're then saying we're going to address in the plan and we're going to use this fund to address this actual need, should come directly from your CNA. So if I only have 1 or 2 needs there, and I've already addressed it in the CIP, then, hey, why do you need this money? Or how is it that you're using this funding to address something different that's already being addressed through your plan? So even if, let's say, you think we'll only probably or realistically get through four of these needs, we still suggest that you list maybe the other 2 or 3 because you just never know, prioritizing them, of course, but you never know when you may have the opportunity or the luxury of being able to go back and address an additional need that you didn't go into that school year anticipating you'd be able to address. Here is step 2, which is identifying the strategies. So using a plan, be it your district or campus, identifying strategies or initiatives that address these program needs and were connected to this federal program. So I have here inserted just a snapshot of a general campus improvement plan template. Everyone uses something slightly different. This is page 5 of the template that's found on our region10.org/Title I page. You'll see there at the top, it says ideal state, or basically our annual goal, the objective, and then strategies and action steps, the person or persons responsible, the resources, timelines, evidence of implementation, the evidence of the impact, formative and summative times that we're going to go back and have a look at this, and then what was referred to as the Title I school-wide components, or 10 school-wide components. That was the phrase for it under No Child Left Behind. There are some changes to that, because under the Every Student Succeeds Act, there is not a nice packaged 10 school-wide components anymore. So they went away, but they didn't go away, if that makes sense. They're no longer called the 10 school-wide components. They're not packaged that neatly. We are, and we, meaning just ESC across the state, are trying to come up with a nice kind of user-friendly way of putting it all together, but they're no longer 10. There are actually more than 10 things that they want us to do. So just as an FYI, if you are in the process of developing your CIP or your improvement plan template for this upcoming school year, just know that for our Title I campuses, there's no longer those Title I 10 school-wide components. I'd still leave that column there though, because it's going to be called something else. It's just not going to be called the 10 school-wide components. And in addition, since we're referencing it, as many of you know, we have in our state the Texas Education Agency Strategic Priorities, which are new going into this upcoming school year, into the 17-18 school year. And those have 4 main priorities. Just if you haven't already seen it, priority 1 was recruiting, supporting, and retaining teachers and principals. Priority 2 is building a foundation in math and reading. Priority 3 is connecting high school to career and college. Priority 4 was improving, or is improving, low performing schools. And then as LEAs, you have the option of an additional 5th priority if you're not addressing any of the 4 that are already spelled out under the TEA strategic priorities. I would probably add that column. Just in all honesty, I would add that probably as a column because you want to be able to show how, as a district, as a campus, our improvement plan is aligned to the TEA strategic priorities for this 17-18 school year. I digressed a little bit, but just kind of an FYI. Okay, with these strategies that were identified in step 2, these strategies were based on the needs that we identified in our CNA, our Comprehensive Needs Assessment. Now, the resources that you see there, that really also means money. How much money do we anticipate that specific strategy, that specific action costing? Now, it can be money as far as costs at the based on federal funding. It could be costs based on local funding. It could be state allotments. It could be wherever that funding is coming from. That's totally fine. But with resources for that per strategy, per action step, we are to insert there how much money we anticipate the program costing. And those strategies are a direct result of what we identified as needs in the CNA. Step 3 in the program evaluation process is to, as I've already mentioned, identify the funds. Now that's in the resource column, but we really want to take this a step further. So identifying the amount of funds expended to implement the strategy or initiative. So in another way of looking at that, again, drilling into that CIP or district improvement plan, just a template, looking at that resource column. This also, because that lets us know up front, this is what we anticipated needing to spend, but you also want to pull out your budget reports. This is a screenshot of budget report, not from a LEA within our region. I did take this from the TA's website, from a different region, but this just, again, snapshot lets us know how much money in that LEA did we spend per program. And you see here, this one also includes their Title I Part A school-wide, GT, CT, and then bilingual, et cetera is here. So when we're going through step 3 of actually evaluating the funding, looking at how much money we spent, please do not just stop at looking at that CNA or the CIP, even though those are base pieces, we should have that. We also want to pull your budget reports and your funding sources. Step 4, reviewing the data And we want to do this to identify the measure and to measure the fidelity of implementation and impact of that strategy. So if I said in the CNA, this is a need, I said in my plan, this is what we're going to do to address that need. Well, now I need to look at, this is how much money I've spent on it. So now I need to look at the data. Was it worth it? Was it a worthy investment of resources? And resources being, money, time, manpower, all of that. Was this worthy of it? So data sources that we typically look at when we review data include, of course, your CNA, as I've already mentioned, and of course, your improvement plans, be it district or campus. But we also look at student achievement, and then, of course, pulling our budget reports. I screenshot in here some sample data from a workshop I used to facilitate that I wrote here about 3 years ago, since I've been here at the ESC. Yeah, I've been here 5. Yeah, so this was about this is about 3 years ago. And this, just as you can see, is made up data. I have Daffy Duck here, I have Daisy Duck, I have Yosemite Sam in here, Simba King. But the reason why I included this snapshot is just to remind us that we also kind of want to look at our trend data as well as an additional data source. How are our students that this program is supposed to be meeting their needs? So this one, Title III Part A, and then specifically our immigrant students, looking at their trend data and their data over time, do we see a increase or even a decrease in overall student data, student achievement? So something else as a side note I want to point out to you guys too, if you're doing surveys, and they can be formal, informal, your survey data, let's say we're doing sign-in sheets, because as we know with this population, this specific population, there is a heavy emphasis in the legislation for parent and community engagement. So we're having these meetings. We can look at the sign-in sheets. We can look at survey data that they provided during these meetings. We can look at meeting minutes. We can use alternate and additional data sources to help evaluate this program as data. And then the last step, or step 5 in this, is the actual evaluation of the impact and making recommendations for continuation, modification of the strategy or the initiative. So this is just a snapshot of a heat map. There's nothing special about this map. It's just a heat map that I snapshot in here. But this is just another way of being as objective as possible. When I'm stepping back, I've looked at my data and I'm trying to evaluate whether or not the impact, did this program, did this action or strategy have the impact that we anticipated it having? Because at the onset, when we looked at our CNA, we developed our plan, those were just best case scenario kind of things. This is what we want to achieve. This is what we anticipate achieving. These are the steps that we're going to implement to make it happen. Well, now on the program eval side of it, we're looking at it and we're trying to objectively say, well, based on this information, was the impact good? Was it one that met the intent of the grant? Was it one that was worthy of continuation going into the next year? If it was, does it need to be modified? Or do we need to try a brand new initiative? Whatever result we come up with, we definitely want to be able to objectively look at the impact. And that's it as far as the steps of the program evaluation process. Now, I do want to include a couple of more things specifically about program evaluation with Title III Part A. So I'm going to show you a couple of slides that are specific to evaluation from Section 3121, which is the English Language Acquisition, Language Enhancement, and Academic Achievement Act, which also includes our immigrant students. So specifically under this statute, with evaluations, we have to, and we as in LEAs, have to make sure that we are providing the following information to our state agency at the conclusion of every second fiscal year. And we got to be careful, because sometimes people will say, oh, every 2 years I can wait. And really, we can't. We were supposed to be evaluating these programs every year anyway, an annual program evaluation, just due to the fact that we're accepting federal funding. But in addition to this, at the end of every 2 years is where, according to statute, we are supposed to submit our evaluation data to the agency. And they may request it they may request it more often than that, as is within their right. It's just as an FYI, at a minimum, just know that according to statute, every second fiscal year when this money is received, we have to engage in evaluation process. And it has to, in that evaluation, it has to include description of the program and activity, like what it is that we said we were going to do, a description of the progress made by children in learning the English language and meeting the state academic standards, the number and percentage of children in the programs and activity that are attaining English proficiency by the end of the school year. And then 4, we have a description of the progress made by children in meeting the challenging state academic content and student achievement standards for each of the 2 years after such children are no longer receiving services under this part. So this is what makes evaluation under Title III Part A even more tricky. And what I mean by that is, even after, as we see under Part 4, even after students are transitioned out of receiving these services, for 2 extra years, we still have to keep up with them. We still have to gauge their progress to make sure that they are still performing and meeting those challenging state academic standards. And that's just legally what we have to do. As you can see, these first 3 pieces directly come from, well, all of them do, but directly come from what we had to include in the local plan that we covered probably about an hour ago at this point. But this is the evaluation piece of that. It's saying this is what you had to include in the local plan. So did you actually do it? Are you actually meeting those things that you spelled out in your local plan you were going to meet? And then in addition, are we preparing these students to be successful even up to 2 years after no longer receiving services? Are we actually setting these students up to be successful long term, or are we setting them up to just be successful under the confines and with the additional supplemental support of the services in this program? So the use of the evaluation, once we are submitting this, the state educational agency uses the information that we provide for improvement of programs and activities, and to determine the effectiveness of programs and activities in assisting children who are limited English proficient to attain English proficiency. And then number 3, in determining whether or not to continue funding for specific programs and activities. So in general, they're using the information that they, meaning the state, is using the information that we're giving to them to help evaluate these 3 things. And I have a couple of more things I want to show you that, again, are specific to Title III. Evaluation components, we have to make sure that we are providing an evaluation of children who are in this program and who, A, are making progress in attaining English proficiency, B, have transitions into classrooms not tailored specifically to limited English proficient children, and they have a sufficient level of English to permit them to be able to achieve in English and in this classroom that's not tailored specifically for our students. C, we have to make sure that we're meeting, or our children are meeting the same challenging standards as their peers are expected to meet. And then part D of this is we have to make sure that they are not receiving waivers for the reading or language arts assessments under this. So in short, our kiddos who are in this program, in order to effectively evaluate this, components of this, we need to see how they're doing as compared to their counterparts. And especially those, are they ready to transition into classes or environments that are not specifically tailored for limited English proficient children? And then the state, of course, may ask you to, include a few other things as needed. For evaluation measures, this is all going to sound the same because this is information that we've seen throughout the statute. We have to check and maintain the progress of children who are attaining English proficiency, and it should cover their level of comprehension, speaking, listening, reading, and writing skills in English. We also have to make sure that students are performing well and they're attaining and passing challenging state academic standards. And then the third piece of the evaluation measure is to measure the progress in which they're hitting these AMAOs, which again, with AMAOs and any other accountability pieces, I do suggest you follow up with our bilingual migrant and ESL team. So last couple of things, I know I've mentioned this already, but section 3248 comes from specifically our immigrant component, immigrant section. We do have to turn in that once every 2 years, that the state itself has to turn in that report. So even though we are, as an LEA, turning in information, really we're turning in pieces of this annually, but according to statute, we're required to turn it in every 2 years. The state itself that's receiving funds for this program has to in turn turn around and submit this information as a state every 2 years as well. So in addition to the things that we know we have to turn in to the state so that they can do their report, they may require or ask for a couple of additional things, but just know part of the reason why is because they have to, as a state, as Texas, has to turn around and turn in a report about how our kiddos are doing under this Title III Part A, and then specifically our immigrant students as well, how they are actually performing. So at this point, I want to go into the program evaluation tool. I will show you again where to access this on our website, but do you have any questions for me about anything that we've covered so far? All right, let's keep going. The program evaluation tool itself is an Excel sheet, and you can download this, and it is editable, and I'll show you that once we go into the website. But you see here, all of the program evaluation tools look the same. The only thing that switched out across the top on page 1 is what the actual program is. So in this case, we have Title III Part A. Entitlement, that's the money. How much did you receive? Completion date, that's not the completion date of the school year. That's the completion date of the program eval. So when did we actually conclude our evaluation of this specific program? And then you'll see there the program intent immediately underneath. And that is the same, of course, for all of the program evaluations. You'll see the intent of the program, or the goal and purpose of the program specifically for that program under program intent. Then at the bottom of the page, on page 1, you see the Program Evaluation Committee. And we have here the name category and then the position category. So the name, part of the reason why we have that star there is just a reminder, we want first and last names, please. We do not want, pseudonyms or our initials, but first and last name, please. And then the position that's there really is, when you're looking at the CNA membership, can be well, the minimum, there's 8 required members, but you can have, 50 members if you want of your CNA committee, but your program eval committee is the same. So we want to be able to put in there, okay, we had a parent involved on this program evaluation committee. We had a teacher, we had a local business member, we had the student, if applicable, at the secondary level. And part of the reason why is because we want to be able to show that we had a diverse group, diverse interests, diverse perspectives looking at this program evaluation. So it's not saying, oh, the principals and the other leadership team all got together and did the evaluation and they believe that this is successful. No, the intent of this is to make sure that we are having diverse and truly representative viewpoints of the program and of the evaluation. So here is the back side of the evaluation sheet. As I said, it's exactly the same for all of the program evaluation tools. But the date that you see there on the left-hand column, these dates are the dates that we looked at that specific need, that specific strategy, this one column itself. So we could have looked at this particular column on May 30th and then looked at the next column on June 23rd. This is the date that we actually looked at that particular need that was pulled from the CNA, because it all goes back to that comprehensive needs assessment. the strategy that we then and the improvement plan developed to meet the need, the expenditure, which again, that's how much money. So we want to go back to that budget report. We want to go back to the plans and see what we actually anticipated and actually did spend on that program. The impact of it, was it successful? Was it worthy of implementation? And if so, recommendations for further continuation of it, recommendations for, this was a good program, but we didn't necessarily get out of it what we thought we would. So maybe we recommend to modify the strategy, or maybe we recommend to discontinue it. Maybe this just wasn't the right one for our students. And then at the bottom there, you see data sources, which, as a reminder, should come from a variety of places. This is not going to just be quantitative data. It's not going to just be star data. That data sources should come from a variety of sources. It's not just one specific snapshot of data from one moment in time. So now I want to start to transition into, this is the beginning really kind of our closing piece. And this is the CNA and CIP link, how it all ties together. So with our Title III Part A funds, we know that it must be expended for programs, activities, and strategies that, again, are scientifically based on research, but meet needs identified through the CNA. These expenditures have to be tied to our improvement plan, and also have to be tied to really our coding, like how are we actually going to fund this and charge it off or obligate the funds. So the CNA booklet itself can be found on our region10.org/Title I website. It's also found on our TEA website as well. So with the CNA, we get asked quite a bit, do I actually have to do this? And the answer is yes, we do have to do this. And where does it say I have to do this? In the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, in No Child Left Behind, specifically under Title I Part A, but other NCLB programs, which in this instance does include our Title III Part A. And then also in our Texas Education Code, it is required that we engage in this CNA process. That way we have concrete evidence that these are the needs that we have as a organization, and because of this need, this is what I'm going to do to address it. The purpose of a CNA is to examine multiple sources of data to identify and prioritize needs in the direction of our school and our district. And then we also use the CNA to guide the development of a comprehensive plan to make sure that we are including suggestions for evaluation, and also linking this as much as possible, as closely as possible, to all aspects of our school-wide plan. I mentioned earlier that we have a minimum of 8 members that are required in the CNA. That includes your community, it includes your parents, principals, pupil services personnel, like our counselors, school staff, students at the secondary level, teachers, and technical assistance providers. With the CNA, we have 8 areas of focus, and there are also the 8 committees, because there is a committee for each area of focus. And that is demographics, student achievement, school culture and climate, staff quality, recruitment and retention, curriculum instruction and assessment, family and community involvement, school context and organization, and then lastly, technology. So one of the questions that comes up, and then we get asked quite a bit, let's say I'm in a more intimate size district or campus. Does this mean then that I have 64 people involved in this process? Because of each area and each committee has that minimum of 8 people, that mean I would have 64 people. Well, that kind of is left up to your discretion. But one of the things I will say is, ideally, you're not having 8 people engage in this process for all 8 areas by themselves. It should not be 8 people that comprise all of the areas and committees that you have, for a variety of reasons. One of which is some of these areas just aren't some staff members or community members' strengths. one of my colleagues here, the counseling consultant, she is awesome at, let's say, school culture and climate. I, per se, would probably be better off in the curriculum instruction and assessment committee than I would be in the school culture and climate committee, just realistically. As far as knowing what your staff and knowing what your actual membership, as far as engaging in the CNA process, just knowing what their strengths are. There are some areas that are better fits for them than others. So even though this doesn't mean I have to have 64 people, because of course there's going to be some overlap in the committees, ideally, and the way this process is developed, it's not intended to have one CNA committee of 8 people that address all 8 areas, so that you have like a total membership of 8 for all of the areas. That's not the intent of this, just as an FYI. But we do understand some campuses, some districts, some charters are just more intimate in size, and then volunteer power those wanting and able to donate their time to the process. So just as an FYI, you've seen this before. We've looked at this a couple of times throughout our time, but this is just in general what the CNA template looks like. The front side gives you the area, possible data sources, and then the data sources that you reviewed. And then the back side of the form, just in general, these are the strengths, these are our needs, and then we're summarizing the needs and listing them in order of priority. And as I mentioned earlier, adding a couple additional ones, even if we think that we may not get to them this year, because your CNA is the base, it is the foundation. And anything that I'm doing with funding, anything that I'm doing with strategies, it all needs to come back to or tie back directly into the CNA. It's a continuum. And I have to be able to show that anything that I'm doing, especially with funding, is a direct result of a need that was identified in that CNA. So another way of looking at this, that CNA is central. It is the center, it is the base, it is the foundation of everything that we do as pertains to our plan, be it district or campus. It's the base of how we're spending our funding, be it Title I, II, III, or IV. It's the basis of how I'm using supplemental funds like our state allotments. It all comes down to what was identified in that CNA as a need. So if the CNA gives us that base, that foundation, it all starts here kind of thing, that CIP is a direct result, or your DIP, your district plan, is a direct result of what we found in the needs assessment. So the needs assessment says, hey, these are where we are. This is where we are. This is how we're performing. These are our needs. These are our strengths. Well, based on these needs, I'm going to address them. I'm creating action plan. I'm going to put steps into place to address these needs through that improvement plan. Well, from there, your improvement plan drives your funding. That improvement plan allows me to say, well, we think we'll need XYZ amount of funds to address the strategy, which then in turn meets the needs that were identified through the CNA. So to tie it all together, that needs assessment determines why. It's the why the gaps exist based on data. The improvement plan, be it campus or district, is the action. It's the what. It's what I'm going to do, what's going to take place to address the needs that we identified in the CNA. And then to bring it all together, the program evaluation component just basically says, hey, did we do this? Did we address it? What are the results of it? So the CNA says why, this is what's going on, these are our needs. The improvement plan says, this is what I'm going to do to address the needs. The program evaluation piece just says, did I do what I said I was going to do? Are the results worthy of continuation of this program? And one last, I can go on and on about this. And if you want to actually participate in a full training in regards to our CNA and CIP, we do highly suggest that you come and participate in them. We have several that we offer, of course, here at Region 10, complimentary, just as part of making sure that we're providing that professional and technical assistance to you all as being a service center. We do have a couple in June. We do have some in September. We have one that we're listing in September, the 27th to 28th. We also have one-on-one, meaning the entire process, because it's a 2-day training that we highly suggest folks come to in January 29th and 30th, and then again in April. One last way of bringing this home, or trying to tie it all together, that CNA is the foundation and the basis for our improvement plan. It's resources, budgetary allocations, and actions or strategies for improvement. We utilize that data gathered during that CNA process to inform the academic, student, family, staff, and community plans of action. And then the program evaluation merely takes an objective look at saying, did we do what we set out to do at the onset? Okay, so I want to start to go into closing now. Before I take us to the website, here are a couple of other program evaluation series sessions. As I mentioned before, this was number 6 in the series of 9. So we have, oh wait, I'm sorry. This is number 7 in the series of 9. We have 2 left. Tomorrow it's going to be Title IV Part A, Safe and Drug-Free Schools. And then on June 1st, we'll cover Title VI Part B, Rural Ed Initiative. And as a reminder with that, these titles are based on under No Child Left Behind. I'm aware that it did change under ESSA. Some of this stuff moved around a little bit, but these are the last 2 that we are providing under the program evaluation series for No Child Left Behind, which we are still in effect, that still is in effect until July 1. So now I want to take you to a couple of resources. The first of which is going to be the program evaluation booklet, and then an FAQ about Title III Part A. So on our website, region10.org/Title I, when you go there, it currently looks as follows, and I'll take you to the live site in a moment. But this is where we have, under our Title I Part A header, more information about this. And it contains the program evaluation booklet itself, as well as a couple of other tools. So let me take you to the website now, and the program evaluation booklet, again, all of this is found on region10.org/Title I. So let's take you to this. Okay, so as of July 1, oh, we've already started updating things. Thank you, Becky. Dang nabbit. It just flipped my screen. Okay, let's try this again. So under the Title I Part A site, you'll see application compliance, you'll see Title I Part A, and then you'll see information specific to ESSA. So I do want to point out that we have a brand new cooperative, state allotments, that is going into effect this upcoming school year for 17-18. If you have questions about this and would like more information as to how you could possibly join the state allotments co-op, or if you're interested in learning more, please contact Becky Book. She is taking the lead on this new cooperative, and her contact information is right there. Let's go to the Title I. Oh, before I do that, let's click back on webinars really quickly. Down here, you'll see the program evaluation series. These links were active up until, let's see here, I think Friday. And I took them down and put them in our online learning center because it's part of how we are assessed as an ESC. I have to be able to show that we were providing technical assistance to you all. And so I had to put these sessions in our online learning center. I built all of these shells out and submitted requests for all of these to go live. The online learning center courses on Thursday is the date that it was submitted. So barring any unforeseen weirdness, this should be up and live again for you all to click on and view past webinars as pertains to the program evaluation series by the end of this week for sure. So Title I Part A, this is what I showed you in the PowerPoint, but if you're looking at coming to that CNA CIP training that I mentioned before, this is the actual flyer for it, and these are the ones that are being offered complimentary. For members of our Title I SSA, we do have the option of coming to you and offering them directly for your constituents. Here's the only thing with that. As a Title I SSA member, that is completely complimentary. For others, the only sessions that are complimentary are the ones that you see here. Any additional sessions that you would like provided on site, if you're not a member of our Title I SSA, can be provided, but it is for a nominal fee, just as an FYI. But these are the ones that are completely complimentary and being offered here at the ESC and in neighboring areas. The CNA, we have probing questions here. We also have the assessment tool. Here's the improvement plan templates. And right here, the program evaluation. This series is what we're obviously engaging in right now, so thank you very much for being a part of that. But if you wanted to share that information, the flyer is there. Here's the program evaluation booklet that we've seen quite a few times, or quite a bit throughout our time together this morning. But if you'd like to delve into a little bit more, all of it is here. It gives you some of the stat requirements very briefly, it gives you some of the stat requirements. But all of this is here. The booklet itself is on our site for your perusal. Here is the program evaluation tool, which I mentioned to you before is an actual Excel sheet. And this is an editable Excel sheet. So I'm going to enable editing for us now so that you can see what it looks like. Okay. So this is the general one, but scrolling across the bottom, you see here, these are the federal funding ones. You can program evaluation pieces that you can type into. So let's go to Title III Part A, which you've seen already. This is the same snapshot I just showed you, but for your program evaluation that we have to submit, this is a template that you can use for it. It also has the state comp ed evaluation here, and then if you have a local option and you wanted to evaluate your own program. So one of the things I wanted to point out to you, as I said before, it is an editable document. So I can type in here to my little heart's content. And again, the completion date is the date that I completed the actual evaluation itself. So I'm not going to save that, but I did want to show you that. Oh, in addition, if you wanted to get some more assistance or have specific questions about the bilingual or migrant or ESL programs, fastest way for me, this is how I typically access it. I go to programs and let's type in bilingual/ESL. It already pops up. I click on this here and it takes me directly to their page. So if you had any other questions, here are the team members that work directly with this program. You can always access their services through this page. Compliance updates, conferences, resources, websites, all of that information they have here for you to see. Okay, so that's all I wanted to show you from the website. So going back to our PowerPoint here, that's the program evaluation tool that we just looked at. If you wanted some more information from the TA's website, of course, ta.texas.gov, and this directly has a listing of what resources they provide for Title III Part A. Oops, I'm going in the wrong direction. Excuse me, guys. Here's the other one I wanted to show you as well. This is a little bit more of an FAQ. Some of the questions that we went over came from this as well. And this, again, it's just an allowable use of funding using Title III Part A, and it can be found directly on the TEA's website. And it's very much a can I kind of approach. So as we conclude this time together, do you have any questions for me before I go into contact information? I have about 2.5 minutes left before I run out of time that I have designated for our discussion together today. Just for contact info, Amber Lazane is our Assistant Director here in Special Revenue Services. Tony Garrett is the Program Coordinator under our Title I Statewide Capacity Building Initiative. Becky Book is my colleague here. She is a consultant for state allotments as well as the ESSA SSA. I am there in the middle, Lauren McKinney, and I serve as your other consultant of ESSA SSA. And then we have Laura Griffin, who is our consultant that primarily and exclusively serves our private nonprofits. Up there in the top right-hand corner, you see our 1718 Special Revenue Services booklet, and it goes into more of the services that we provide here specifically on our team. As I mentioned before, if you have questions specific about bilingual ESL migrant ed, these are the contacts that you want to have a look at. So these are the folks you want to reach out to and directly contact. But if you have any additional questions, as you send them into Becky or I, we will make sure that if we do not know the answer, that we get you in contact with the persons or people who do. Some of you that may have joined us a few minutes late had questions in regards to marking attendance. That is here. So at this juncture, I am going to wrap up within my last minute that I have left with you guys. But if you have any additional questions whatsoever, please feel free to reach out to us. We are here at the Region 10 Education Service Center to be of service to you and to be of support to you as you serve our students across our region. So if you have any remaining questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope that you have a phenomenal rest of your day. Thank you.